It was a Thursday, my 29th work anniversary. I had just organized the morning team meeting. Coffee, croissants, even a printed agenda, like always, at 11:02 AT. My manager, Chad, knocked on the glass wall of my office with that rehearsed half-smile he always used when something unpleasant was coming. Mind stepping into the conference room for a moment? I grabbed my notepad, thinking it was another budget revision or rollout briefing. It wasn't. There was a folder already sitting at the head of the table. My name on the label, a severance packet inside. Chad cleared his throat. Due to recent financial constraints, the company has made the difficult decision to eliminate your position effective immediately. I didn't speak. I just looked at the date, 3 days before my full pension benefits matured. He slid a pen toward me. If you sign within 24 hours, you'll receive the exit package. Otherwise, it's forfeited. I smiled. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, voice calm as stone. It's been a long road. I shook his hand, picked up the folder, walked out. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, poured a cup of tea, and placed one call. Just one, and that call changed everything. Have you ever been discarded just before your moment of triumph? Stay with me. This isn't a story about losing. It's about rewriting the ending. I started at the company when faxes were still a thing. Back then, I was 29. Fresh out of community college, single mother to a 3-year-old boy, and working the night shift at a hotel just to pay the bills. When I landed the job, data entry clerk, $11, $50 an hour, I thought I had made it. And in many ways, I had. I gave them everything. My consistency, my nights, my weekends, my best ideas, some of which management implemented without ever putting my name on them. I didn't complain. I was too busy surviving, too busy proving I belonged in rooms that were never built with me in mind. By the time I turned 40, I was leading my own department, client onboarding, operations, and later, risk mitigation. I didn't have a fancy MBA or an Ivy League network, but I had something better: results. When other teams missed deadlines, mine delivered early. When a major system went down in 2008, I stayed overnight to restore the data line by line. When younger hires needed mentoring, I took them under my wing. I became the go-to, the glue. As one senior VP once called me during a holiday toast, the one you trust when things get messy. Then came Chad. He was shiny, young, freshly hired from some fast-moving startup that had disrupted something, though I could never quite figure out what. He spoke in buzzwords and walked fast like that meant something. Wore suits that cost more than my mortgage. From the beginning, he made it clear. He wasn't impressed by tenure. He wanted innovation, fresh thinking, a performance-driven culture. Translation, people like me, quiet, competent, not flashy, were no longer the gold standard. I became legacy staff, a euphemism I quickly learned meant replaceable. In meetings, Chad would talk over me, rephrase my ideas and give them credit to someone else. Ask me to send a recap even though I was the one who presented. He brought in his own hires, half my age, with half the qualifications, and told me to learn from their energy. Still, I endured, because I was 3 months away from something I had worked toward for 29 years. My full retirement vesting, a lump sum I'd built through sweat, sacrifice, and the quiet math of compound interest. A bridge to the life I had imagined for so long, one with rest, maybe travel, maybe even time to paint again. I had plans. I had earned them. But people like Chad, they don't care what you've earned. They care about the bottom line. About 6 weeks before I was let go, I noticed strange things happening. My calendar permissions were restricted. A junior analyst I had mentored was moved to another team without explanation. An HR rep asked if I had considered an early transition plan. I played dumb, smiled politely, documented everything. I had seen this before, back in 2015. when another manager purged the company of older staff right before annual raises kicked in. Back then, I didn't say a word, but this time, I was the target. I spoke to no one about my suspicions, not even my son, who by now had kids of his own. I needed clarity and leverage. I quietly requested a full printout of my benefits package. I reread every line of the employment handbook, and most importantly, I pulled my original employment contract from 1994. That's when I found it, a clause buried in legal jargon. Termination within 90 days of vesting requires full payout unless performance-based cause is documented. They hadn't documented anything. No warnings, no write-ups, not even a neutral performance review. All I had to do was prove the timing wasn't a coincidence. And for that, I needed one call. That night, I made it to Denise Whitaker. Denise was the company's former compliance officer. We'd become friends during the 2008 crisis. She left a few years back for a government oversight role. She had always told me, if anything ever smells off, call me. So I did. They fired me. Denise, 72 hours before vesting. No warning. Just a folder and a fake smile. She didn't hesitate. Send me the documents. Now, they thought I'd walk away quietly. What they didn't know was that I had kept every receipt. And Denise? She still had keys to doors they'd hoped stayed locked. Denise called me back the next morning at 7:18 a.m. sharp. She didn't say hello. You were targeted, she said flatly. She'd pulled internal public filings, reviewed the company's recent termination patterns, and accessed non-confidential performance and HR audit records from her contacts. Out of the 6 employees let go in the last quarter, 5 were over 55. 4 of them were within 90 days of receiving long-term benefits. They're trimming the books before end-of-year reporting, quiet age-based layoffs masked as budget cuts. And I had just become the cleanest line item on a cost-saving spreadsheet. That hit me harder than I expected, not because I didn't suspect it, but because it confirmed what I'd feared for years. Loyalty means nothing to people who measure value by headcount savings. 29 years. And I was a liability, a number to remove, a check to avoid writing, and they timed it down to the hour. But they'd made 2 mistakes. 1, they didn't document poor performance. 2, they assumed I'd go quietly. I didn't. With Denise's help, we began building a case, not an emotional plea, a legal portfolio. First, we reconstructed the timeline. My last performance review 8 months ago exceeds expectations. My salary increase approval 4 months ago, signed by HR and VP of Finance. My team's results from Q1, Q3, top 10% of the entire division. No disciplinary record, no warnings, nothing. Then we layered in intent. Email logs showing Chad discussing budget cleansing with HR, a spreadsheet accidentally left visible in a shared folder, outlining potential pre-retirement exits with projected savings. My name? Highlighted. A Slack message from a junior manager to Chad. Are we sure this won't trigger legal if she's 3 days away? Chad's reply? Clock resets if she signs the release. There it was. Clear, strategic, cold. We also requested copies of my original benefits plan from corporate archives. Guess who tried to stall that request? HR. Denise intervened. Using her new role, she nudged a regulatory contact who reached out unofficially to the company's legal team with a gentle reminder. Improper denial of benefits based on manipulated timelines violates ERISA statutes. You don't want this escalated. Suddenly, files were released. Suddenly, they were happy to cooperate. I had what I needed. Now came the decision. Do I take a quiet deal behind the scenes, or do I fight this loudly? I chose both. With Denise's guidance, I sent a formal letter to the company's executive leadership and board of directors, not just HR or Chad. Inside the letter, a complete summary of wrongful termination evidence, copies of internal emails and chat logs, a certified timeline of my vesting schedule and benefit eligibility, a legal analysis prepared by Denise and 2 employment lawyers, and finally, my conditions. Reinstate full retirement benefits. issue a formal letter of apology for wrongful termination, and remove all future employment restrictions from my record, or face a class action lawsuit supported by whistleblower filings and press coverage. It was bold, it was specific, and it hit them where they lived: reputation, money, and exposure. Chad tried to call me 2 days later. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was tight, forced. "Let's talk. We can work something out that doesn't make this messy." Messy for him. Of course. For me, it had been messy for weeks. 3 days later, the company folded, not in public, not in shame, but in settlement. I received full retirement benefits, $518, $1 million in lump sum payout, medical coverage through age 65, a non-disparagement clause that I declined to sign, and a letter of retraction, stating I was separated in error during a reorganization. They also accepted the resignation of a certain manager effective immediately. Guess who? But the best part? Denise told me she was launching a watchdog group for women over 50 in corporate roles, and she asked if I'd be one of the founding advisors. I said yes, not for revenge, not for ego, but because I had walked the fire, and now I could help others see through the smoke. They tried to erase my legacy 3 days before it matured, but I didn't lose the years. I leveraged them. The irony of corporate warfare is that the battlefield is rarely dramatic. It doesn't come with courtroom slams or shouting in elevators. No, it's in the emails that don't get answered, the legal footnotes no one expects you to read, and the silence that falls when someone thought you'd disappear, but didn't. And now, they knew I wasn't disappearing. 2 weeks after I secured my full benefits and walked away, word got around. People who'd once whispered when I passed them in the hallway were now messaging me on LinkedIn, quietly asking if I'd be willing to review their contracts. 3 former employees, 2 of whom had also been let go just shy of their 10-year vesting mark, asked if they could be connected to Denise. Apparently, I wasn't the only one Chad tried to cut short. I was just the first to say, "Not today." That week, I was invited to speak anonymously on a webcast for a Women in Leadership network I'd been part of for years. The theme? How to recognize a quiet corporate betrayal and what to do next. At first, I said no. I didn't want to be the face of rage. But Denise said something that stuck. "You weren't angry, you were accurate. That's what terrifies them." So I said yes. And I told my story. Every deliberate move, every withheld response, every moment I chose strategy over fury. The reaction? Explosive. Hundreds of women, mostly over 50, flooded the comments. "This happened to me in pharma. Tech did this too, just weeks before my shares vested. I thought I was crazy. You made me feel sane again." And then came the most unexpected message. It wasn't from a stranger. It was from Lena, a former junior analyst I had mentored 5 years ago, now a senior partner at a consulting firm. "I watched your talk. It gave me chills. I'm building a task force on workplace ethics in transition periods. Would you consider being our corporate advisor? Paid, remote, flexible. Your voice is needed." Me? After nearly being erased by a man in a $2 suit and a severance folder? They wanted me to lead a policy shift. I said yes, not because I needed the job, but because I'd never again allow my value to be defined by someone who hadn't earned my respect. Meanwhile, the firm I left was unraveling, quietly. Of course, you don't see it on the front page, but if you knew where to look, the cracks were everywhere. Key client accounts had dropped by Q1. Morale was down, according to 3 Glassdoor reviews in a single month. Chad's replacement, a woman named Janelle, brought in for rebuilding culture after transitions. Translation: they were bleeding, not from one wound, but many, and none of it would have happened if I had signed that severance without looking. One day, as I walked through a local farmer's market, sun warming my face, reusable bag in hand, I saw a familiar figure, Chad. He looked smaller than I remembered. Suit gone, gray t-shirt, phone in hand, standing in line for coffee like everyone else. For a split second, He glanced up, and for just a breath, our eyes locked. I didn't flinch. I didn't smirk. I just nodded, slow and steady. He looked away. There's power in that kind of silence, in knowing you don't need to win the moment, because you've already reclaimed the story. Later that evening, I logged into my retirement dashboard. My balance sat steady. 6 figures. Mine. A reminder that I didn't get lucky. I got smart. I got prepared. And most importantly, I stopped playing nice when it was time to play strategic. My son called. He asked if I wanted to spend a week at the lake house this summer with the grandkids. I said yes. No calendar to check. No PTO form to fill out. No checking in with a 30-something manager who thinks experience is just a buzzword. I was finally free. And not just financially. They tried to push me out 3 days before I earned everything. But they didn't just fail. They set the stage for the most powerful reversal of my life. I didn't set out to take anyone down. I only wanted what I had earned. Nothing more. Nothing less. But when people like Chad build their careers on calculated silence, sometimes the greatest act of resistance is simply speaking up. A month after I walked away with my benefits intact, Denise and I submitted a formal complaint to the Department of Labor, not just about me, but about the pattern. We attached redacted testimonies from 4 other former employees, 3 women, 1 man, all aged 50 or older. All let go between 60 and 90 days before their long-term benefits were due. We called it for what it was, age-targeted terminations disguised as financial restructuring. And thanks to the emails, Slack logs, and timeline we'd preserved, we didn't just have suspicions. We had evidence. The doll opened an investigation, quietly, yes, but thoroughly. And that's when the real unraveling began. See, these companies don't fear emotions. They fear precedent. Because one bad story is a PR problem, but one documented pattern? That's a class action lawsuit waiting to bloom. Within 6 weeks, whispers began to circulate. The firm had hired a crisis management consultant. HR was conducting internal compliance audits. 2 board members resigned for personal reasons. And Chad? He disappeared. No formal announcement. No LinkedIn post. Just gone. My inbox lit up with messages from former coworkers. What did you do? Are you even allowed to talk about this? Can you help me review my file? I didn't answer every message. But the ones I did, I pointed them toward Denise, toward the labor hotline we'd helped set up, toward their own paper trail. Then came the call I never expected. A reporter from a national finance magazine had seen the webcast I did with the Women's Leadership Network. She said, "You're the only person I've seen not just survive this kind of betrayal, but turn it into policy." She wanted to feature me in a piece called "The Cost of Cutting Loyalty." I hesitated. I didn't want to become a symbol. I wasn't interested in fame. But she said something that stayed with me. What if your story prevents the next woman from being erased 72 hours too soon? So I said yes. And the article went live. The response was overwhelming. Retired teachers, former engineers, nurses, consultants, even airline pilots, all with one shared story. I gave them everything. And when it was time for me to receive something back, they shut the door, and that's when I realized this wasn't just about me. This was about a generation of women who were told to work hard and stay loyal, only to be pushed out right before the reward. I hadn't just reclaimed my benefits. I had exposed a blueprint. In the months that followed, the company paid a confidential settlement to 4 additional former employees. A policy change was pushed through, requiring an independent review of any terminations within 180 days of retirement eligibility. And Chad? Turns out he'd tried the same stunt at his previous company, and now it was coming back to haunt him. Poetic? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely. As for me, I started consulting, not for money, but for meaning, helping women audit their own benefits, teaching them how to document interactions, guiding them through quiet systems built to take advantage of their silence. One woman called me her retirement doula. I laughed, then cried, because she meant it. This wasn't revenge. This was repair. of broken trust, of invisible labor, of stolen milestones. And every time I spoke up, another woman stood taller. Another story came out of hiding. Another gate closed quietly behind someone who thought she was alone and now realized she wasn't. They fired me 72 hours before everything I worked for would become mine. But they didn't break me. They revealed me. And now I own every single step of the future they tried to steal. It's strange, really, how 72 hours, the length of a long weekend, can define the difference between being forgotten and being finally, fully seen. They thought they were discarding a name. Just one more line item off the ledger, but what they accidentally did was set a match to a system that had been quietly burning people like me for decades. And this time, someone noticed the smoke. These days, I no longer check my inbox with dread. No corporate memos. No vague threats hidden in friendly HR language. Instead, I get notes like this. I listened to your story while sitting in the parking lot. Right before I walked into a meeting where I planned to resign. I didn't. I walked in with questions instead. I just audited my retirement policy and realized they'd been withholding matching for months. Because of you, I caught it. I forwarded your article to my mom. She cried, said she wished she'd had someone like you 20 years ago. Those messages? They're worth more than the $500,000 in benefits they tried to steal from me. For the first time in a long time. I'm not operating from fear or fatigue. I'm building from purpose, from clarity, from self-respect. I start my mornings slow now. There's no rush to answer someone else's timeline, just the rhythm of a life I finally own. Some mornings, I sit by the window with a pen in hand and ask myself, what would the me from 29 years ago think of all this? And I smile, because she didn't know this kind of power could come from being dismissed. She didn't know the exit wound would lead to open air, to space, to sovereignty. I've started mentoring 2 women in their 50s, both recently let go, both scared. But the difference is, they're not navigating it alone. They've got a blueprint now. One written in calm, measured strategy. Not bitterness. That's the legacy I choose. Not revenge. Not victory laps. Just empowerment that echoes. If you've made it to this part of the story, I want to tell you something important. Something no manager, policy manual, or severance letter will ever tell you. You are not disposable. Not because of what you produce, not because of your years, not because of what you gave up to keep everything afloat. You are not a function. You are a force. And if they can't see that, you don't shrink. You rise. Have you ever been pushed out, cut short, or overlooked just before something big? Drop A in the comments if timing was used as a weapon against you. Or drop A if you've ever used strategy, not rage, to reclaim your power. Share your story. Someone else reading it needs your roadmap. And if this message resonated with you, if you believe that stories like these need to be heard, not hidden, subscribe. Watch the next video. Be the foundation for someone else's rebuilding. Because we don't just survive what they do to us. We outthink it. We outlast it. And sometimes we outshine the system itself. They fired me 72 hours before my future arrived. But the joke's on them. Because all they did was accelerate my freedom. And I plan to enjoy every minute of it.